The internet promised a new world, a place where strangers could connect, opportunities could appear overnight, and distance no longer mattered. For millions of people in the 1990s, it felt like stepping into the future. Chat rooms were buzzing, forums were alive with conversation, and behind every screen name was someone new to meet. But hidden inside that same digital frontier was something far darker. A predator who understood the power of anonymity long before anyone else did. Imagine trusting someone you've never met, someone who speaks with confidence, offers help when you're struggling, promises opportunity when life feels impossible. Now imagine that the person on the other side of that conversation isn't who they claim to be at all. In quiet towns across Kansas and Missouri, women began disappearing. No witnesses, no crime scenes, just letters, explanations, and the lingering feeling that something wasn't right. For years, nobody connected the dots, until investigators opened a sealed chemical barrel on a rural property and discovered a nightmare that would shock the entire country. This is the chilling story of John Edward Robinson, a manipulator who turned trust into a weapon and the internet into his hunting ground. Not long after that first horrifying discovery, investigators began to realize they were not dealing with an ordinary criminal. The man connected to those barrels had spent decades quietly building a life that looked completely normal from the outside. His name was John Edward Robinson, and at first glance, he looked like someone you might trust without hesitation. He lived in Kansas with his wife of more than 3 decades. He was involved in community activities, volunteered with youth programs, and carried himself like a respectable businessman. Neighbors described him as friendly, polite, even helpful. He had the kind of personality that made people comfortable around him, but behind that carefully constructed image was to understand how Robinson became one of the most disturbing predators in American criminal history. You have to go back to the beginning, long before the internet, before the chat rooms, before the barrels. John Edward Robinson was born on December 27, 1943, in Cicero, Illinois. He grew up in a household that was far from peaceful. His father struggled with alcoholism and was known to be violent, while his mother ruled the home with strict discipline. It was a tense environment, the kind that often leaves deep psychological marks on children growing up inside it. Yet to the outside world, Robinson seemed like a model young man. As a teenager, he joined the Boy Scouts and quickly excelled. By the age of 13, he had achieved the rank of Eagle Scout, an accomplishment that brought respect and admiration. In 1957, he even traveled to London with a group of scouts who performed for Queen Elizabeth II. It was a story Robinson would proudly repeat for the rest of his life. According to accounts he loved to share, he also met legendary entertainer Judy Garland backstage during that trip. She supposedly gave him a kiss on the cheek, a memory he used for decades as proof of his importance. Those moments helped him craft a narrative about himself, one where he was always impressive, always successful, always someone worth trusting. But beneath that narrative, cracks were already beginning to show. Robinson later enrolled at Quigley Preparatory Seminary in Chicago, a respected school for boys who were considering becoming priests. The environment demanded discipline and strong academic performance. Robinson struggled with both. School records revealed that he frequently fought with classmates and often landed in detention. His grades were poor, and he failed to keep up with the expectations of the institution. After only a year, he was expelled. For many people, that kind of setback might have forced a moment of self-reflection. For Robinson, it simply triggered the pattern that would define his entire life. When reality failed him, he replaced it with lies. He moved on to Morton Junior College, where he attempted to study medical radiography. Once again, things didn't go well. After 2 years, he dropped out without completing the program. But that didn't stop him. Instead of admitting failure, Robinson simply forged documents claiming he had completed the training. Using those fake credentials, he managed to secure a job as an X-ray technician at a medical practice in Kansas City. It was an early glimpse of the skill that would eventually make him so dangerous, the ability to confidently present a false identity and convince others it was real. In 1964, at the age of 21, Robinson married Nancy Jo Lynch. To outsiders, the couple seemed like the perfect young family. Over the years, they had 4 children, a son, a daughter, and later twins. They lived in ordinary neighborhoods, attended community events, and appeared to be building a stable life together. But while Robinson played the role of husband and father, he was already developing another identity, one that revolved around manipulation. The first major sign appeared in 1969. While working at the medical practice where he had used forged credentials to gain employment, Robinson was caught embezzling money from the business. Investigators discovered he had stolen roughly $33,000, a significant amount at the time. When the case went to court, the outcome should have been severe. Instead, Robinson received 3 years of probation. It was a light sentence, but it carried a dangerous lesson. He could break the law and still walk away. Throughout the 1970s, that lesson shaped everything Robinson did. His criminal activities expanded into securities fraud, check forgery, and additional embezzlement schemes. He frequently moved from place to place, leaving behind victims who had trusted him. Yet he continued to build a respectable public image. He became a scout leader, coached youth baseball teams, and even taught Sunday school. On the surface, he looked like the kind of person communities relied on. But behind that mask, he was constantly searching for new ways to manipulate people. One of his most bizarre scams occurred in 1977. While working with a local charity that supported people with disabilities, Robinson forged letters from the organization's executive director. Then he forged another letter from the mayor of Kansas City. Both letters nominated him for Man of the Year. But Robinson didn't stop there. He organized an entire awards luncheon in his own honor. For a short time, it actually worked. The event took place, people attended, and local media even covered the ceremony. Eventually, however, reporters noticed inconsistencies in the signatures on the letters. When they investigated further, the entire scheme collapsed. Newspapers exposed Robinson's fraud publicly. His reputation was shattered. But once again, something remarkable happened. He still didn't go to prison. By the early 1980s, Robinson had accumulated multiple fraud convictions and served several short jail sentences. Some lasted only a few months. None of them were long enough to truly stop him. And during that time, his method of manipulation slowly became more refined. He targeted people who were vulnerable, people struggling financially, people desperate for opportunity, people willing to believe promises that sounded too good to be true. Robinson would approach them with confidence, offering business opportunities, investments, or jobs. Once they trusted him, he would take whatever money he could and disappear. It was a pattern that repeated itself again and again. But sometime in the mid-1980s, something inside Robinson began to shift. The thrill of financial scams was no longer enough. After decades spent perfecting deception, manipulation, and control, the crimes that had once satisfied him started to feel small. And that was when his story began to take a much darker turn. What had started as fraud was about to become something far more horrifying. What happened next marked the moment when John Robinson's crimes crossed a terrifying line, from deception to disappearance. September 1st, 1984. 19-year-old Paula Godfrey had just finished high school and was eager to start her adult life. She lived with her parents in Overland Park, Kansas, and like many young people her age, she was searching for a career that could give her independence. When she came across a job listing for a company called Equi2, it sounded promising. The position involved sales and management training, with opportunities to travel and build a professional future. The man running the company seemed confident and professional. That man was John Robinson. He told Paula she had been selected for an opportunity that would change her life. According to Robinson, she would travel to San Antonio for training before beginning work in a growing consulting business. It sounded exciting, legitimate. Paula believed him. On the morning of September 1st, Robinson arrived at Paula's house to drive her to the airport. Her parents watched as she left with a man they believed was offering their daughter a real chance at success. It was the last time anyone saw Paula Godfrey alive. Days passed with no contact. When Paula's parents called Robinson, he reassured them that everything was fine. Their daughter was simply busy with training and settling into her new opportunity. Then a letter arrived. It was typed, not handwritten, and signed with Paula's name. The message said she was safe but didn't want to see her family for a while. Something about the letter felt wrong. The tone didn't sound like Paula at all. It was distant and strangely cold. Her parents reported her missing. Police questioned Robinson, but his explanation seemed simple enough. He claimed he had only driven Paula to the airport. What she did afterward, he said, had nothing to do with him. With no body, no witnesses, and Paula legally being an adult, the investigation stalled. Robinson had learned something important. If you make it look like someone left willingly, authorities often stop looking. Paula Godfrey was never seen again. 4 months later, Robinson was already searching for another victim. In January 1985, he began visiting Hope House, a shelter in Kansas City that provided refuge for women escaping abusive situations. This time he used a different name. He introduced himself as John Osborne, claiming to represent something called the Kansas City Outreach Program. The program didn't exist. Inside the shelter, Robinson met Lisa Stasi, a 19-year-old mother who had recently fled an abusive relationship. She was living at Hope House with her 4-month-old baby daughter and trying desperately to rebuild her life. Robinson saw opportunity. He offered Lisa a chance to start over. According to him, the outreach program could provide housing, job training, and a stable future in Chicago. To Lisa, it sounded like hope. She told family members she had been accepted into a program that would change everything. A man named John Osborne was helping her get back on her feet. On January 9, 1985, Robinson picked Lisa and her baby up from a relative's home. He said they would spend one night at a motel before traveling to Chicago. The next day, Lisa's sister-in-law received a phone call that still haunts the family. Lisa sounded terrified. "They say I'm an unfit mother," she said breathlessly. There was chaos in the background, voices, panic. Then she gasped, "Here they come!" The line went dead. It was the last time anyone heard Lisa's voice. What Robinson did afterward revealed the full extent of his cruelty. Only days later, he contacted his own brother and sister-in-law. The couple had been struggling for years to adopt a child. Robinson told them he knew of a baby who needed a home. According to the story he invented, the baby's mother had committed suicide in a motel room. The child had no one left to care for her. For a payment of $5,500 in legal fees, Robinson said he could arrange a private adoption. The couple agreed. Robinson handed them Lisa's infant daughter, along with forged adoption papers that included fake signatures from attorneys and even a judge. The baby was raised believing the people who adopted her were her real parents. Meanwhile, Robinson had eliminated a witness and made money doing it. To this day, Lisa Stasi's body has never been found, and Robinson wasn't finished. In 1987, he targeted another young woman. Catherine Clampett, 27 years old, had recently moved to Kansas City from Texas. Like Paula Godfrey before her, she was searching for work and trying to build a career. She responded to another advertisement connected to Robinson's consulting business. The offer sounded impressive: travel opportunities, a new wardrobe, and a management position in a growing company. Catherine met Robinson to discuss the job. She was never seen again. Her disappearance remains unsolved to this day. But that same year, Robinson's criminal luck finally seemed to run out. After years of fraud and financial schemes, he was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to prison in Kansas. For the first time in a long time, he would be locked away. Robinson entered the Western Missouri Correctional Facility, where he would remain until 1993. Many people assumed prison would finally stop him. Instead, it gave him something else: time. Time to plan, time to observe, and time to meet someone new. Inside the prison, Robinson became acquainted with a woman named Beverly Bonner. Beverly was 49 years old and worked as the prison librarian. She was intelligent, well-educated, and married to a doctor who worked at the facility. Robinson began talking with her regularly. He was charming, polite, persuasive, the same traits that had fooled so many others. Over time, he convinced Beverly that he was a misunderstood businessman who had simply been caught up in unfortunate circumstances. And Beverly believed him. By the time Robinson was released from prison in January 1994, she had already made a life-changing decision. Beverly left her husband, filed for divorce, and moved to Kansas to work with Robinson in one of his business ventures. It looked like the beginning of a new life, but it was something else entirely. Robinson convinced Beverly to send her alimony payments to a post office box he controlled. He promised that together they would build a successful business and a fresh future. Within weeks, Beverly Bonner vanished. When her ex-husband tried to contact her, Robinson calmly explained that she had moved to Australia and wanted to start a new life far away from everyone she knew. For years afterward, Robinson continued cashing Beverly's alimony checks. But during his time in prison, Robinson had discovered something that would transform his crimes forever. A technology that was just beginning to spread across the world. The internet. And he quickly realized it could give him access to victims in ways no predator had ever had before. Behind the safety of a screen name, John Robinson was about to reinvent himself and begin hunting in an entirely new way. By the late 1990s, the pattern surrounding John Robinson was finally becoming impossible to ignore. Across Kansas and Missouri, investigators began comparing missing person cases. At first, the connections seemed weak. Different victims, different timelines, different circumstances. But one name kept appearing again and again in witness statements, financial records, and suspicious correspondence: John Robinson. Women would meet him through business opportunities, job offers, or online relationships. Soon afterward, they would vanish. Families would receive strange typed letters claiming their loved one had decided to leave and start a new life. The tone was always the same: cold, distant, and completely unlike the person who supposedly wrote them. For years, the lack of physical evidence protected him. No bodies, no crime scenes, no proof. That changed in the spring of 2000. After a series of complaints and suspicious encounters with women who had survived interactions with Robinson, investigators finally gathered enough evidence to obtain search warrants. A multi-agency task force began quietly monitoring his activities while building a case. Then, on June 3, 2000, law enforcement moved in. Officers arrived at Robinson's rural property in Lacine, Kansas, expecting to find evidence related to fraud and assault investigations. What they discovered instead would shock even the most experienced detectives. Inside several outbuildings on the property were large industrial chemical barrels, heavy steel containers normally used to store hazardous materials. When investigators forced open the first barrel, a powerful smell filled the air. Inside was the decomposing body of a woman. Then they opened another, and another. In total, 5 barrels on Robinson's Kansas property contained human remains. At the same time, detectives searching a storage facility Robinson rented across the state line in Missouri found 3 additional barrels. Altogether, 5 victims were identified from those containers: Suzette Trout, Isabella Lewicker, Beverly Bonner, Sheila Faith, and Sheila's disabled daughter, Debbie. Each victim had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, likely from a hammer. Their bodies had been sealed inside barrels and left for years. 3 other women, Paula Godfrey, Lisa Stacy, and Catherine Clampett, were still missing, and their remains have never been found. When Robinson's trial began in 2002, prosecutors laid out a devastating case. Financial records showed he had been collecting victims' pensions, disability checks, and alimony payments long after they disappeared. Investigators uncovered forged letters, fake contracts, adoption documents, and thousands of emails tied to his online identity: slave master. The jury found him guilty. Robinson received the death penalty in Kansas for 2 of the murders and additional life sentences for others. In Missouri, he later accepted a plea agreement that resulted in multiple life sentences without parole. Today, more than 2 decades later, John Edward Robinson still sits on death row. He has never revealed where the bodies of Paula, Lisa, and Catherine are buried. For the families of those women, the search for answers continues. And perhaps the most chilling part of this entire story is the lesson it left behind. John Robinson understood something before most of the world did: that the internet could hide predators just as easily as it connected people. Behind a username, anyone can pretend to be someone else. And sometimes, the person on the other side of the screen isn't just lying. Sometimes they're hunting. If this story shocked you or made you think, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future cases from the Shadow Files crime series. It really helps us continue bringing these stories to light. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think investigators will ever discover the missing victims Robinson never confessed to? Let me know what you think in the comments below.